The marble floors of the mansion gleamed like mirrors, reflecting crystal chandeliers that hung from ceilings so high they made people feel small just by standing beneath them. This was the home of Richard Holloway, a self-made millionaire known across the city for two things: his ruthless business tactics and his ice-cold heart. On this particular morning, the mansion buzzed with tension. "Everyone needs to be perfect today," the head butler whispered sharply to the staff. "Mr. Holloway is already in a foul mood." Richard Holloway was hosting a private charity meeting, one he didn't truly care about, but attended for appearances. Powerful investors, city officials, and influential elites filled the living room, sipping expensive coffee and laughing politely. Then the front doors creaked open. A boy stepped inside. He couldn't have been more than 12 years old. His clothes were worn, his shoes 2 sizes too big, and his dark hair fell messily over his eyes. In his hands, he clutched a small, battered backpack like it was the only thing holding his life together. The laughter stopped. The conversations died mid-sentence. One of the guests scoffed. "Is this some kind of joke?" The boy took a hesitant step forward. His voice trembled, but he spoke anyway. "Sir, I need to see Mr. Richard Holloway." Richard slowly turned around, his sharp gray eyes locking onto the child. His face hardened instantly. "What is this?" Richard snapped. "Who let him in?" The head of security rushed forward. I don't know, sir. He just walked in." Richard stood up, towering over the boy even from across the room. "Get that boy out of here," he shouted, his voice echoing off the marble walls. "This is not a shelter." The boy flinched. Several guests shook their heads in disgust. One woman whispered, "Poor thing," but made no move to help. As security grabbed the boy by the arm, he cried out, panic flooding his eyes. "Wait, please," he shouted. "I can prove it." Richard narrowed his eyes. "Prove what?" The boy swallowed hard. "That you're wrong about me." Richard laughed, short, sharp, cruel. "You've got 10 seconds before you're thrown back onto the street." The guards paused, unsure. The boy took a deep breath. "My name is Eli Carter. My mother used to work here, 15 years ago." The room went silent. Richard's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. "I don't know your mother," he said coldly. "Yes, you do," Eli replied softly. "Her name was Anna Carter. She was your assistant." Several older staff members exchanged glances. Richard's jaw tightened. "That's impossible. Anna left years ago." "She didn't leave," Eli said, his voice cracking. "She was fired, the same day she found out she was pregnant." Gasps rippled through the room. Richard slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. I don't tolerate lies." Eli reached into his backpack with shaking hands. Security moved forward, but Richard raised a hand, stopping them. Out came an old, folded photograph. Eli held it up. It showed a much younger Richard Holloway, smiling. His arm was around a woman with kind eyes and familiar features. "Anna." Richard stared at the photo like he'd seen a ghost. "That's impossible," he muttered. "My mom kept that picture hidden," Eli said. "She told me if anything ever happened to her, I should come here." Richard's voice turned dangerous. "And what makes you think I'd care?" Eli's eyes filled with tears, but he stood his ground. "Because before she died," he said quietly, "she told me you once promised you'd protect us." The room felt suffocating. Richard slowly sat back down. "Anna died?" he asked, barely audible. "Yes," Eli whispered. "Last month. Cancer. I tried everything. Hospitals, shelters, nothing worked." A few guests looked uncomfortable. Now, others avoided eye contact. Richard cleared his throat, regaining control. "Even if this story were true, which it isn't, you have no right to barge into my home." Eli nodded. "I know. I don't want your money." That caught Richard off guard. "I just want a chance." "A chance for what?" Richard demanded. Eli took a step forward, his voice steadier now. "A chance to prove I'm not worthless. A chance to show you what my mom taught me." Richard laughed again. "And what exactly can a street kid like you possibly do?" Eli looked around the room. "You built an empire, right?" "Yes. By seeing things others couldn't." Richard hesitated. Eli continued, "Give me 1 hour. If I fail, I'll leave and never come back." The guests murmured. Some were amused, others curious. Richard leaned back, folding his arms. 1 hour, he repeated. "Fine. Entertain me." Eli smiled for the first time. They led him to the back of the mansion, to a neglected wing filled with broken electronics, old documents, and abandoned equipment. No one's been able to make sense of that mess, Richard said mockingly. If you're so special, start there. Eli nodded and got to work immediately. Minutes passed. Then 20. Then 30. Richard watched from the doorway, expecting failure. But something strange happened. Eli moved with focus far beyond his age, rewiring, reorganizing, fixing. He used nothing but scrap tools in his own hands. Suddenly, one of the mansion's long-dead security screens flickered, then turned on. Gasps echoed down the hallway. That system hasn't worked in years, the head of security whispered. Eli wiped sweat from his forehead. Your firewall was outdated. Anyone could have hacked you. Richard's heart skipped. What did you say? Eli turned around, eyes sharp. Someone already tried. The screen flashed, showing a live feed of a masked figure attempting to breach the mansion's digital vault. Panic erupted. Richard rushed forward. How did you? I stopped him, Eli said simply. And locked him out permanently. Silence. For the first time in decades, Richard Holloway felt something unfamiliar. Shock. He stared at the boy standing before him, the boy he'd ordered thrown out. And in that moment, Richard realized. This child hadn't just walked into his mansion. He had walked into his life. The room was frozen. The security screen still glowed, displaying the failed intrusion attempt, red warning symbols flashing like a silent alarm. The masked hacker's image had vanished, replaced by a single word. Blocked. Richard Holloway stared at the screen, then at the boy. You're telling me, Richard said slowly, that someone was trying to break into my vault, and you stopped them? Eli nodded. They've been watching you for weeks. Today was the final attempt. The head of security's face went pale. Sir, that vault holds your private accounts, offshore assets, legal files. I know exactly what it holds, Richard snapped, then turned back to Eli. How could a kid possibly know this? Eli hesitated. Because my mom taught me, he said quietly. Richard stiffened. Anna wasn't a hacker. No, Eli replied. She was smarter than you ever knew. The guests were no longer pretending to sip coffee. Every eye was locked on the boy now. Eli continued, after you fired her, she struggled. But she never complained. She learned everything, coding, systems, security. She said knowledge was the only thing no one could take from us. Richard felt a tightening in his chest. You said she died, he muttered. Eli nodded. She worked until the end. Even when she was sick. Richard turned away, his jaw clenched. Memories he had buried long ago began clawing their way back. Late nights, quiet conversations, the way Anna used to look at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention. Why didn't she ever come back? Richard asked, his voice lower now. She did, Eli said. Richard turned sharply. What? She came here 3 times, Eli said. Security turned her away. The last time, she collapsed outside the gate. A sharp breath escaped Richard's lungs. No one spoke. Richard suddenly felt the weight of the mansion pressing down on him, not like power, but like guilt. Leave us, he said to the guests. One man protested. Richard, the meeting. Now. They didn't argue again. As the last door closed, silence filled the mansion. Richard looked at Eli. If you wanted revenge, this would have been perfect. Eli shook his head. I didn't come for revenge. Then why are you here? Eli reached into his backpack again and pulled out a small, worn notebook. This is my mom's. Richard took it with trembling hands. Inside were diagrams, security protocols, handwritten notes, and on the very first page, a sentence that made his vision blur. Richard is not a bad man. He's just afraid to feel. Richard swallowed hard. She believed in you, Eli said softly. Even after everything. Richard sat down heavily. For the first time in years, the millionaire felt powerless. I didn't know, he whispered. I know, Eli replied. She said you wouldn't. Minutes passed. Then the head of security rushed back in, panic in his eyes. Sir, we traced the hacker. Richard straightened. Who is it? The guard hesitated. It's your business partner. Victor Crane. Richard's blood ran cold. Victor Crane, his closest ally, the man who helped build his empire. He was planning to drain your accounts and disappear tonight, the guard continued. If the boy hadn't stopped it. Richard closed his eyes. Betrayal always hurt more when it came from someone you trusted. Call the police, Richard said quietly. And freeze everything. Yes, sir. When the guard left, Richard looked at Eli again, really looked at him. You saved my entire empire, he said. Why? Eli shrugged. Because my mom believed it was worth saving. Richard stood up. You're not leaving, he said suddenly. Eli froze. What? This house, it's your house too. Eli shook his head quickly. I don't want charity. Richard walked over to him and knelt, bringing himself eye level with the boy. This isn't charity, he said. This is responsibility. Eli's eyes filled with tears. I don't need a father. Richard nodded. I know. But I need a chance to be one. Eli looked away, struggling. I can't just forget everything, he whispered. I don't want you to, Richard replied. I want to earn it. That night, for the first time in years, Richard Holloway canceled all meetings. He showed Eli the guest room, then corrected himself. No, he said. Your room. Days passed. Then weeks. The media exploded with news of Victor Crane's arrest. Stock prices stabilized. The empire survived. But inside the mansion, something far more important was changing. Richard started eating dinner at the table again. He listened. He laughed. And Eli went to school. One evening, Richard watched from the doorway as Eli fixed a broken lamp, focused, calm, brilliant. You're just like her, Richard said. Eli smiled faintly. I know. Richard hesitated. Eli, would it be all right if? Eli looked up. If what? If someday, you called me Richard. Eli thought for a moment. Then nodded. That's a start. Richard smiled, a real one. Because the boy he had once ordered thrown out didn't just save his empire. He saved him.